Well, Senator Brewer, I know you've been in Ukraine for the last several days. Let's just start here. Talk to me about some of the travels. How long have you been there? Give me an overview of what you've done and where you've been.
Well, let's see. We're on the third week, so we're working toward the first month. We'll hit that beginning next week. So we've been here quite a while. We'll obviously started in Poland because you can't fly into the Ukraine, and then it's a trip to the border, which is a bit of an ordeal. You get across the border from Poland into the Ukraine, and your first stop is Lviv. We had a chance there to spend some time, talk to the mayor, kind of find out some of the challenges they're having. Spent some time at the hospital there, meeting with wounded soldiers. And then from there, we went on to do some humanitarian relief between Lviv and Kiev. Kiev, we spent time north of Kiev looking at some of the towns that were destroyed when the Russians did their initial invasion on 24 Feb. And then from there, we headed for Kharkiv, which is on the eastern side, and it is on the border with the Russian army as they move forward. They're just out on the outskirts. So that was a pretty wild place. A lot of rockets inbound. And then from there, we went south to Dnipro, and from there on to the Donbass. We spent last week there doing humanitarian relief and getting a chance to kind of spend some time with some of the locals, find out their, I guess, kind of life routine that they're going through right now. And now we're south of there, getting ready to kind of make the whole loop and come back. It'll be about 2,000 kilometers, the whole circle that we make.
And about how long? I know you said you've been there 3 weeks, but how long do you plan on staying?
Well, right now, I have chemo in Omaha on the 29th, so probably around the 27th, I'll be back.
I know we had to move our time today around a little bit to have this conversation because some of the challenges in transportation. Talk to me about what you've experienced in terms of just trying to go from point A to point B in Ukraine.
You bet. Well, there is no safe place in Ukraine. From the time we crossed the border into Lviv, they were striking bases close to there and into the cities. The closer you get to the east, the more bombs, rockets, whatever is hitting. And as you can imagine, it causes some challenges. The railways are damaged almost daily. And that's because the new equipment from NATO is coming in on the rail lines. The problem is trying to get other things out of the country, like refugees and wheat and things like that, become almost impossible because of the constant cycle of repairing everything. And with losing both the ports, there's no ports available. Now, that may change. You may have heard today on the news that the UN's trying to work a deal to bring the wheat out. That's critical because right now, if you were to compare Nebraska or Kansas to the Ukraine, we're on about the same parallel. So they're harvesting wheat right now. They started around the 4th of July, kind of like we do in Nebraska, and they're going hard and fast. And now their biggest challenge is a lot of the artillery and rockets start fires and burn the fields, and so they have to be prepared to, take a tractor and a disc and do their own, firefighting because there's no assets to do it with. Plus, everything is at risk. If the Russians can see it, they will shoot it. So all of the land that is in the area that's occupied by the Russians is kind of a lost cause for this year, which is about 23% of the total farming ground in the country. And so as you drive through, and I noticed today, it's about an even split between sunflowers and wheat. There's some barley and corn, but I would say it's probably wheat, sunflowers, and corn is kind of the way it stacks. And of course, the sunflowers here it's a mix of the oil, but they also use the byproducts for hog feed.
Let me ask you this question. I know we've seen on social media videos of the Russians. We had conversations about stolen grain, bombs put in fields. but now we're also seeing the Russians turn the fields to fire. What type of damage have you seen, and what are you hearing from? I know you visited a Ukrainian farm here recently. Tell me about what you're seeing and what you're hearing from farmers there.
Well, if you take and you draw about a 50-mile swath along the eastern side of the lines where the Russians occupy, that ground is really kind of hit and miss with the fires and the losses. They do what they can, and a lot of the fields are planted so that they'll have corn next to the wheat, and then you might have a tree grove and then another crop. And so it kind of can, if you lose the one crop, you don't lose it all. But there are some massive fields of wheat. And the amazing part is, imagine Iowa the size of Texas. That's really what you have here. It doesn't matter whether you're on the east, the west, the north, the south, there's crops everywhere. And so I think as a country, they're going to be okay on the ag side if they can just get it out. The wheat crop looks good. Now, I did see some of it laid down today. It doesn't look like they have enough combines. It's all coming ready at the same time, and they just don't have enough to do all the crops or to haul it, or you just manage that piece of it. And so I don't know, there may be some loss that way, but we are losing a lot of crops through the damage from the indirect fire and rockets they'll hit. It takes just a little of a flash, with a wheat crop that's ready to go, and it takes off. And they a lot of times they shell at night. So by the time the farmer realizes, he's already lost his crop.
Well, you were talking a couple of different times. So if we talk about infrastructure and the challenges that have occurred over there, how are Ukrainian farmers taking the wheat or whatever they're harvesting right now from the field and then going from there? How's that happened?
Well, there are some elevators, but they're very small compared to ours. So you may take a town, the size of York or somewhere like that would have the ability to, say, have 1 million bushel storage. Here, I would think theirs would be about a third of that. They're not near as tall. They're not as big. They store some on the farm, but most of it is traditionally been taken straight to market, and they don't have that luxury right now. Something they have done is they've got some large grinding mills that they brought forward to the vicinity of where the combat is, because the refugees need flour. They need flour to feed the soldiers. So the crops are literally going from the field to the grinder to make the wheat and bagged into 50-pound bags, and then brought forward to the mobile bakeries, and then they're then making it. So from field to someone's mouth might only be a few days.
What did you see? I know you visited a farm. What was the conversations like with farmers right now?
Well, obviously they're concerned. In some cases, the war isn't really affecting them. It's just far enough away. Their concern is they know they can store the corn on the ground and not lose that much, but the wheat's a different story. So they're trying to make shift facilities into storage units. Tomorrow we'll be on a farm again. Tomorrow's kind of the big day we've got, and they've just got strange practices over here. They picket cows by the road. So imagine you put a halter on with a pretty long lead, hammer a stake in the ground so the cow can't get up on the road, kind of get to the edge, and that's how they mow the ditches. And the cows get, they get good grass, and it's a little nerve-wracking because you're hoping everybody's got a halter on as you're ripping down the road. But one of the things that will probably affect this country long beyond the war is that right now they're moving so many tanks on trailers that really weren't designed for that weight, and they're tearing the roads up horribly. And so to move the farm products in the future is going to be more and more challenging, because you're literally going to rip up your equipment trying to get it from point A to point B. Today we were on roads, and part of the reason we had a delay that would normally be a road if it was in Nebraska or Kansas, it might be a 60-mile-an-hour road. Here it's a 20-mile-an-hour road, because if you go any faster than that, you rip up the vehicle where it's broken. And so they'll have a lot of infrastructure problems, I think, when it's over. I think everyone's just praying that the war is over before the freeze comes because if you compound the wheat and barley and oats that are now, kind of at the limit of places to store, and then you throw the corn on top of that, I don't know. I think there'll be a break point where we lose a lot of crops, and of course, it's going to become an issue for being able to replant for next year, because you still have that buffer, and the line changes where the Russians are. So one day they may move a mile forward, and the next day they may push them back 2 miles, and so that no man's land can't be farmed because there's too much unexploded ordnance. And at some point, that'll be part of the reconstruction that's going to have to go on. Is go into those fields and get rid of all the unexploded rockets. And the Russians, I don't know, they must not do a very good job making the rockets, because it seems like about every third one's a dud sticking out somewhere. But if you think about it, it isn't like everybody's fighting to buy Russian cars or Russian anything. So I suppose their rockets are the same way.
So even after whenever the war ends, there's still going to be X amount of time for farmers in Ukraine to get quote unquote back to normal, or get to a place to where they're maybe were relevant before the war.
Yes, and if this works with the UN, it's bigger than people realize, because it's got a domino effect. Because right now the ports are full, the storage facilities at the ports are full, there are ships full, and they can't leave because of the minefields. So they have to cut a swath through the minefield. They have to get the blessing of the Russians so they don't use their navy to sink the ships. And then they got to bring in these huge container ships to be able to move all of this out. And for that to happen in a way so that it is efficient and timely, they're going to have to make that decision pretty quick to be of any value toward the fall.
Senator Brewer, I know that you've served our country in the armed forces, but let me ask you this. You've been over there for 3 weeks. What's been the most striking thing that you've seen in regards to maybe the more ag-specific sector?
Well, I guess the unnecessary destruction of the farms, it isn't just, shooting up tractors or shooting or burning fields, but they're using farmhouses for target practice with tanks. They're doing things that are so unnecessary in a war, and it's almost out of vengeful spite rather than to have a professional army going against another army in a combat. This is a hate war almost, and they will probably try and approach the Ukrainians and say, listen, we need you to end this war, so why don't we give the Russians what they got right now, and we'll just call it good. And that ain't going to happen. The Russians will fight to the death to get back the land they've lost. The Donbass, which is what they've lost to this point, is partially a breadbasket, but more importantly, it's their oil fields, it's their coal mines, it's their steel plants, and it's the heart and soul of the Ukraine. So I don't see them giving that up. And so I wish I could give you a better report on telling you, the war could end tomorrow, but I don't believe the war will probably end until maybe late fall at best. The Russians are taking just monstrous casualties right now. The U.S. interdiction with weapon systems such as the HIMARS, the M777 cannon, artillery cannon, they made a huge difference over here. The HIMARS has struck huge ammo dumps on the Russian side that you could see for 50 miles, the explosions. And so they've done a lot to really hamper Russia's ability to fight this war. The Ukrainians are getting more and more confident as they get more and more men trained. And I think you'll probably see a big offensive in the near future, and you'll see the Ukrainians start to take back some of the land they've lost.
And Senator Brewer, as we wrap up, just a few more questions. What's the take-home message that you want to pass along with what you've seen to ag producers in the U.S.?
Well, I would tell you that I cannot see the ability right now of Ukraine to feed the world as it did. If you look historically, they feed Africa and a good share of Central Asia. That's not going to happen. There'll be some trickle out. There'll be some trains to get some stuff out. There'll be a few trucks, but it's minuscule compared to what the Ukraine used to do. So consequently, you're going to see probably high prices, which and it's already bad, of course, but at the point where you just don't have enough to feed people, then it becomes even a bigger issue. So that I would watch and you just be aware of. But more importantly, I think is that the Ukrainians, they have a spirit like no group of folks I've ever seen. And there's a lot of Americans over here that are pitching in and helping. Unfortunately, our State Department or military can't or haven't. But there's a lot of individuals that have been helping, and a lot of it's ag related. And so, there's some really good news stories about what they're trying to do. I think you'd be surprised at how modern and nice a lot of the equipment they have here is. We're seeing combines that are state of the art, the best there is. And same thing with the John Deere tractors. So don't put them in this mindset that they're on, old rickety tractors. These farms are big and efficient. And if the Russians had just quit shooting at them, they'd be as good of farmers as anybody in the world.
You mentioned that a lot of people have gone over there. Why did you make the choice to go to Ukraine?
Well, originally I was going to help with some weapons training. The weapons did not arrive here. They're kind of tied up in some discussions. There's always experts that say, well, if we give them this weapon, it could make them mad and something might happen. I'm kind of the mindset that if the enemy has that weapon system, we probably should have it in the hands of the folks we're support too. But with that said, they gave me an opportunity to come out and help with humanitarian relief. The one place where nobody wants to go and help with the humanitarian relief was right on the border. And I knew we were getting close to the front when the Ukrainian army was going the other way and we were going forward. And it was a little nerve-wracking. Every day you would have artillery hit. You'd have to go into the basement of some of these old homes and wait for the artillery to stop and then come back up and try and get stuff unloaded. And you're getting shot at more than I got shot at in Afghanistan in 8 tours. So it's a pretty hairy place, but people need fed.
And my last question was, compare what you're seeing to your time in serving in Afghanistan.
Well, the big difference is, our attempts to do ag support in Afghanistan were really pretty futile because everything evolved around the poppy and producing the drugs that were more profitable than any farm product we could produce. And it was a different environment that, the strange people that had a different culture and language and everything else. If you were to go and spend time with some of these Ukrainian families, you'd swear you were dead set in the middle of Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, and they look like us and they behave like us and they think like us. And so, you almost feel like you're in another town in a different state helping them. And if it wasn't for some of the language barriers, this would be just old home week coming over here.
Senator Brewer, those are my questions. Anything else you'd like to add?
Well, if folks feel so inclined, I've seen the humanitarian relief in action over here, and it's impressive to see how much folks are giving of their time and their efforts, 18-hour days, trying to move stuff to get it to where it needs to be. Other folks going forward to the battle lines to deliver it to mostly elderly that are too poor to afford to go anywhere. They have no car, they have nothing. And so they stay. It's all they've known. They've lived in that house their whole life. And even if Russians are shooting at them, that's all they know. And so it's such a sad story. If we weren't giving the humanitarian relief, it would even be, a bigger disaster than it is now. I mean, it's a genocide to a degree with what you see. But if they so feel inclined, I think that is as good of donation they can make anywhere in the world, the humanitarian relief over here in the Ukraine.
Well, Senator Brewer, appreciate the time here, and we wish you the safe travels throughout the rest of your time in Ukraine and safe travels getting back here to the United States.